So welcome to the build of my model hovercraft. I've been making hovercrafts for a long time, since I was at school, and actually it's only about 5 years ago that I actually got a really successful one, and that's because I changed from a little glow engine to 3 EDFs, electric ducted fans. One fan provides the lift, and then you can see I've got 2 at the back to do the steering. But now I'm going to go through the sequence of how we build it, starting with the deck. This is what I call the deck. So we're going to make the deck, and the deck is made of 2 bits of plywood. It's 3mm or 1/8 plywood, and it's 380 by 300. You'll see in the drawings there's a few weird dimensions, but it all makes sense when you do it. This is the one I've already cut. The measurement that does the corners here is 111.3 millimeters. That might seem quite strange, but that allows this distance here to be the same as the one across the top. So when you come to make the skirt, you've only got front sections and side sections. So you only have to deal with making 2 different sizes. And the only difference between the front section of wood and the back section is the front section has the hole for the fan. So I've cut out both the halves of the top deck, and now I'm going to glue them together. You can see on the worktop that I've put a bit of greaseproof paper, that's to stop everything sticking. And the glue I use, I prefer to use a Gorilla Glue. It's a really good glue for use in wet environments. It actually uses water to set with, and it takes about 1 hour to 2 hours to fully dry. So I tend to use this a lot with models. So you can see I've joined together the 2 halves that make up the deck. Before I glue this down in the middle, I have marked out where all the bulkheads go. It's a lot easier to mark them out now, because when you stick that down, it's very hard to mark around it. Just follow the drawings to see where each of the bulkheads go. Basically that is going to be the bulkhead. They're going to be made out of balsa wood, and they're going to go everywhere you draw a line. There's quite a few of them all the way around. So I'm going to stick that down now and start cutting out the bulkheads. So I've had a good evening cutting out the balsa parts. I'm now ready to start gluing them, but I thought it's worth me pointing out the 2 templates I use. These are made out of 1/16 plywood, and I use a nice sharp scalpel to cut around these to cut out the balsa parts. The longer one here is used for the corner pieces, and this one's used for all the other normal side bits and front bits. Where you've got bits that are shorter, I still use these templates, but I've drawn on these lines, and what you do is you basically cut out all the front bit and then put a mark where the line is, and then move the template along to meet up with the line, and then cut the back section out. That way you only have to use 2 templates. So that's the first lot of gluing done. I've done the sides and front and back. What I haven't glued is these strips in here. I basically put them in place just to hold everything in the correct place. I want to glue those at the end, and also these bits along the top need to be cut to length. So I'll remove those strips now and put the corners in. So I've managed to progress quite well with the build of this hovercraft. I managed to fit all the bulkheads in last night, and before I went to work I glued in this front strip. Up until that point, the front strip and the one that goes on the top, this one, was just used to hold everything in place. Now that's nicely glued, I can cut this to size and glue that in, and then I can start the sheeting process. So that's all the balsa bits glued. Just going to let that dry for a couple of hours. Then the next bit will be to reinforce this edge along here. The reason I do that is I'm going to sheet down here, and this edge down here seems to take a lot of the impact when you hit things. So I like to reinforce that to make that nice and strong. So I managed to glue in all these reinforcement strips down the side down here. Before I sheet the side, I've got to sand them down. I only had a square section. It would have probably taken me longer to saw them to triangle section than it does to sand them down. So I'm just going to sand them down. It's important to note that you really don't want to be putting too much force into this, because you will break some of the bits. So I'm using a perma-grit block to get most of the edges off, and then once I'm happy, I've got a piece of wood with sandpaper stuck to it, and I can just run that very carefully along the side just to get it nice and level. So that's what I'm going to do now, and then I'm going to stick the sides down, both sides and front and back. So I'm just going for a close-up here before I do this final side. You can see here that I've sanded nicely, so you've got a good area to glue the next bit on, and this bit here has just got a little flat on it. So what I will do is I'll use the Gorilla Glue to glue around here, and then with the paintbrush wet the underside of this, and that's how Gorilla Glue works. And the whole thing will be held in place with the pins, and that's all there is to it really. And there you go, just use as many pins as you think is necessary to hold everything in place while the glue dries. So there we go. I'll let those dry, and then I've got to put these pieces in down here, then sand everything back and sheet the sides, sorry, the corners. So I've covered the sides and the front and back, that glue's dried, and then I've sanded down corners, and I've now sheeted 3 of the corners. I just thought I'd zoom in so you can see what the last corner looks like before I sheet it. So I've sanded down these edges here, and all I need to do is glue and pin that in place, and then that's the sides done. Should be able to see I've finished doing all the corner pieces, and I've actually sanded all the joints down. The sanding is easiest done with this piece of wood with sandpaper on it. You can basically just run it along the side, and works really well. If you use a piece of paper on a small block, you might find yourself thinning out these sections here trying to get the joint down. Also, this block works really well for sanding this flat. You can go all the way around, just go all the way around in a circle a few times until it's nice and flat. So the next part is to sheet the bottom, but before we get carried away, it's important to note that there's going to be a ply strip set along here, and that ply strip will be where we fix the skirt to. So to mark that out correctly, I'm going to have to sand this nice and flat towards the edge, and to do that I'm going to have to unscrew it and then mark out. Right, I've finished sanding down all these side bits so everything's nice and flush with the plywood, and now I just wanted to zoom in and show you how I mark out where the plywood goes to mount the skirt. So what I tend to use is a square, place the square up to the edge, get a ruler, put the ruler in place, then mark along 57 and a bit millimeters. As long as it's 57 and you mark on the correct side of the line, you'll be okay. Do that those are the bulkheads, and then fill in the lines. They're drawn across. What you should find is you'll get a cross here and here. So once you've finished marking out all these 57mm indications here, you can then measure the distance that you need to cut the plywood. In my case it's 110mm, and then you can cut the plywood out. These are 15mm strips, and these will be glued on the markings. So you position that edge on the mark and the 15mm goes inside, and these will all be glued in place. And once they're glued, we can then sheet around the perimeter and then in the centre. So I'm going to get these glued and then do another video. So I've got all this ply strip stuck down. For your information, the long bits were 330mm, and these side corner bits, front bits, were 110mm. I've then cleaned off the little bits of glue that were on each bulkhead, and I don't know if you can see on the camera, but where there's a bulkhead I've just drawn with pen where it is. The reason being, the next stage is to sheet the rest, so when I sheet it with the balsa wood I won't know where to stick the pins. So by marking out where the bulkheads are, I can pin through them. So all I'm going to do is do the sides. I'm going to do a whole lot in one go basically. The sides, corners, front and back. I mean, it's up to you how you do this. This is how I like to do it. And also the inside bit. This is all 3mm balsa. Once that's all glued down, you'll basically have a finished hull. So hopefully by the time you see this again, it will be finished. So hopefully you can see this is now complete. I've glued all the bottom down, and I've even sanded it all nice and flush. I'll put a little radius on, and that, if you want, is all you have to do. Now I'm going to do one more stage, and the main reason I'm doing this is because my hovercraft is used mainly on water. So I'm going to actually cover this with a fiberglass cloth. So it's a 180 gram per square meter cloth, and I'm just going to put that in place and let that go off overnight. That gives a really nice strong covering and makes it nice and waterproof. Otherwise you're going to have to paint it and seal it however you see fit. So the first thing I've done is mix up a batch of resin and paint a good coat over top. And then what we do is we very carefully lay the cloth over the top, make sure it's central. And again, don't need too much resin now. Very quickly, without too much pressure, go over the cloth again just to press it in to the already wetted surface. Be careful on the corners, because obviously you want this cloth to fit nicely over the corners, over the edges. And there you go. You really shouldn't need much resin on this. Where it's, you can still see the glass, you just want to put a bit more on that. I have got a roller. I'll be rolling this in a minute. Okay, so that's complete. I'll leave that overnight to set, and that will be the hull complete. So now we've finished the hull, it's time to start the other parts, which is the front lift fan and the action man seat and central bit where the rear fans are going to be mounted as well. So I'm just going to zoom in and explain these bits. So the front fan housing is made of 5-6 bits of wood. You can see it here. Before you glue it together, just assemble it and check it fits in the slot in the front. You don't want to be gluing this all together and then find it doesn't fit. It should fit nice and tightly and then slide forward, and then it locks in place. 2 screws will hold it in place in the back, but if you ever need to change the fan, you can just simply slide it back and lift it out. If you're happy with the fit, then what you can actually do is glue all these bits together and keep it in the front hole to keep it all aligned, but obviously don't glue this section to the hull. So that's going to be glued now, and the other part is the main superstructure here. I've just cut out the 2 side parts, obviously just join the wood together and cut them out in one go, and the same with these 2 bits here where the fans will basically mount here. Again, make sure it fits before gluing, and that bit is going to be slotted in there and glued nicely down before we progress with anything further. The bits of wood here are just to align everything up. They'll be pulled out, and 3 of these sections will be replaced with just standard plywood, which I'll cut to size to go. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I've progressed a little further over the last day. I've glued in place these 4 bits of wood, so this bit's got a bit of strength now. I've also glued in these 2 bits, and underneath the first 10mm of these 2 bits is a reinforcement bit, because that's where the screws go for the fan. So the next bit to do is a little triangle here, which is the other half of the mount for the fan. It's made up of these bits of wood. And once you've glued this together, you can then get it all in line with the lines I've drawn, and that will hold the fan in place. And that's very close to being finished then. So I'm now going to take a little look at the front lift fan unit. I'm going to look at how we mount the EDF into the wooden housing. First thing to note is these EDF units, you can take the cowl off, and that's really useful. So we can then slot that in the back, and with it sticking through the top, just put the cowl back on, and that holds everything very tightly and exactly level. So the next thing we need to do is work out how we're going to screw the edges down, and for that I've got a little piece of wood here, and it's got a 45-degree angle on, and what I've done is I've drilled a hole in here. Can you see that? Yes, I think you can just about see that. And I then aligned it up and drilled a hole in here. So what you're going to do is that is going to basically fit in there. And there's going to be one there and one over here. And when I'm ready to get everything in line and glued up, I'll temporarily put the screws in, not too tight, and then make sure everything's correct, and then glue it all and leave it overnight. And what you'll be able to do is get to the screw from here and through the gap here. It's a bit tight, but you can get to the screw from there. So I'm now going to glue those, screw the bits of wood in place onto the EDF fan, and then glue everything in place. So the next stage is now complete. I've glued the little triangles into place that hold the other half of the fan, and the fans at the moment are screwed into place to keep everything in a line. And now we're going to look at the final bits of the front fan. So on this you've got a couple of bits of balsa. You need to stick that bit of balsa in, that bit of balsa in, that's only 3mm balsa, and then the whole lot needs to be slid into place. Now I've got a bit of greaseproof paper here, and the idea is slide it into place, and then we're going to stick this bit of wood on the front, and that will be the front fan complete.